4-minute speech over hockey. Quote from former Philadelphia Flyers coach Fred Shiro: "We know that hockey is where we live, where we can best meet and overcome pain and wrong and death. Life is just a place where we spend time between games." Kind of just going to go over the history of hockey, some of the penalties in the game, and then a few current events. Hockey really began in the mid-1800s, but the actual league now, the National Hockey League, or NHL, began in 1926. Started off with 6 teams, which was Detroit Red Wings, Chicago Blackhawks, Boston Bruins, Montreal Canadiens, New York Rangers, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Originally, a Stanley Cup was presented until 1970, and then since then it's actually just been a replica of it. The first set of actual rules for the game were established in 1877. Then the first artificial ice rink, where they didn't actually have to play outside, was made in 1894. The way they have the goal right now with the net and everything, it was first introduced in 1900. And then the first NHL Players Association was formed in 1957. And lastly, the first NHL draft was in 1963. Then a few of the penalties, I'm going to be passing out just visual aids so you can see the different calls for the referees. There's going to be cross-checking, which is when you have your stick with both hands and hit the player like that. Tripping, pretty obvious with the stick, tripping the player. Hooking is when you would take your stick, reach it around somebody, and kind of pull on them to slow them down. High sticking would be taking your stick anywhere above the shoulder level and hitting somebody else in the face. It's actually an increased penalty if they end up drawing blood. Then fighting, you would think it would be obviously just fighting, but even if it's an attempted swing at a player, you can still get a 5-minute penalty for fighting if you would swing and miss. Then there's boarding, where they would be so many feet from the boards, check them, and then they their face ends up hitting the boards. Most of those are just 2-minute penalties, with the exception of fighting, and then with high sticking, if you draw blood, it's 4 minutes. As far as current events, they've been cracking down on a lot of penalties. A lot of people have been getting injured. Former Detroit Red Wing Brendan Shanahan is currently in charge of all the calls on as far as suspending players or not. Last season, Philadelphia Flyers had 1,318 penalty minutes, and New York Rangers averaged 0.79 fights per game, which is usually pretty high. I know Detroit Red Wings was the lowest with around 0.23. Then 2012 Stanley Cup champions was the Los Angeles Kings. It was actually the first time they ended up winning the Stanley Cup in their history. Currently they're having labor talks between the NHLPA and the actual NHL, trying to make it agreements between salaries and whatnot. And also the oldest current player plays for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Name is Dwayne Rolson. He's 42 years old and he's a goaltender. And basically that's all of the history, penalties, and current events of hockey. And just next time you end up watching a hockey game, just try to remember the history behind it, because there's quite a bit of history. That's it.